This is Kevin Conroy, the voice of Batman. And you're listening to the DCAU Review, hosted by Cal and Liam, streaming at DCAUreview.com and on your favorite podcast app.
Get charged up for action that'll shock your system.
Tell me that's not cool.
An unstoppable superhero and his crew embark on impossible missions and will bring mutated villains to justice.
When Static's in the house, bad guys better step off.
Pull the plug on crime with the adventures of Static Shock. Yeah!
Welcome, everybody, to episode 257 of the DCAU Review. I am one of your hosts, Cal. With me, my good friend, good brother, the man that runs our Twitter account. It's Liam. Liam, welcome to our final edition, for this month at least, of Static Shock Reviews as we look towards, not quite finished the month, but next week is the fifth week of the month, I should say. So we'll be covering an Elseworlds, as we'll talk about it a little bit later. But we are excited to move forward. We've completely wrapped up Season 1. We're done with all of Season 1 of Static, and we are winding down Season 2. And we've got another episode of Season 2 to cover today.
That's right. So today we'll be covering a very interesting episode, as we talked about kind of a classic trope for a TV series where there's an off-screen dead parent, which is, of course, the episode where the mom or dad starts dating again. So we have a fun episode to talk about today with Pop's girlfriend.
That is right. And, of course, before we get into our review for this week, we are, of course, going to get to the official IMDb movie database, Internet Movie Database synopsis for this week's episode, which originally aired here in the States, so at least according to Google, on March the 9th, 2002, meaning we just passed the 21-year anniversary of this episode's debut. And of course, the official IMDb synopsis is brought to you by the Pod Tower. Head over to youtube.com/the Pod Tower and get our entire catalog of episodes, including each and every Static episode we've covered to date, including some of the more memorable and lovable ones, including Hard as Nails, which of course features the Dark Knight, and a lot of the other ones, the ones featuring Anansi the Spider and the Man of Steel Superman, and we've covered a bunch of fun ones already. So head over to youtube.com/the Pod Tower today and subscribe to that channel, and like our videos exclusively over there at youtube.com/the Pod Tower.
That's right. So this is the synopsis for Pop's Girl, which was written by Christopher Simmons, directed by Dennis Cowan, with music by and animation by Tama Production. And that synopsis reads as such. The whole Hawkins family is going out to dinner with Pop's new girlfriend. However, trouble with the police disrupt the night.
What?
Poor.
That
F.
I don't think that's even what doesn't even really. Yeah, it's poor English. It doesn't accurately really describe what happens. Doesn't mention some of the main plot points. Yeah. That's F. See me after class. We're gonna have to do a makeup assignment, and we're gonna be speaking to your parents about that, about the results of that. But yes, I guess we can get into our own attempt to accurately provide a synopsis for this week's episode, as we kick things off with a pair of what the DCAU wiki refers to as "quote unquote" rebellious boys. The DCAU wiki, what a tremendous resource. But these two young gentlemen are Royce and Frankie, that we'll learn later on are students that we just have happened to never see before, that also go to Static's high school. They look like young men. I thought that these were like 25-year-olds, but maybe they just were held back a couple years or something like that. I don't know. But they are supposedly high school students, and they are clearly up to no good, as they are not only gate jumping and boarding the subway without paying, but they are eyeing to get themselves into a little bit of trouble, as they spot a man on the subway that is carrying a mysterious, suspicious briefcase, which appears to have been handcuffed to him at one point. But of course, he's alone on a subway car. What do you do at that time if you're guarding something that's so important that you handcuff it to you? You, of course, release the handcuff so that you can massage your wrist. Like, this is how insane.
And he sits it on the ground. It's not even like he keeps holding on while he does it.
Yep, he sits it on the ground and just sort of like is really into trying to massage his own wrist. And this, of course, catches the attention of Royce and Frankie. Royce kind of elbows Frankie and tells him that they're gonna makes eyes that we're gonna go ahead and see what's up with this case. So at the next stop, they sort of both bum rush this guy that was carrying the briefcase, snatch the case, and escape off of the car as the doors close behind them, leaving our security guard or our agent or whoever this person was tasked with transporting this mysterious briefcase alone and on the car driving away as Royce and Frankie escape. And they escape up to an alley, which we'll see a little bit later as they kind of unpack and break into the briefcase, and they discover that it's actually some odd purple vials, or it's vials that have some sort of purple liquid in. But before then, we of course get to the start of our Virgil story, which we learn that Virgil's father has been dating somebody, and he's so excited as Virgil shares this story with Richie that Virgil's dad is very excited, but Virgil's a little bit on edge about it. And as of course, as you mentioned, is the case in every television story with this type of plot, the kids are a little bit less than warm towards the idea of their father dating. So Virgil's talking about how they're going to have dinner with this mysterious woman this evening, and that it's so important that Virgil's dad is making him wear a tie.
When my pops came home last night, he was walking on air, almost like he'd never been on a date before.
He's a widower. He's been out of practice, V. So what do you think? Is he serious about, what was her name?
Trina. Serious enough to make me wear a coat and tie when we all go out to dinner? I'm telling you, Rich, this whole pops dating thing is too weird for words. Sorry, man, my bad.
Watch where you walk, dreadhead.
I said I was sorry.
Oh, you want to throw, huh? Royce. You just caught a break, Virgil. Yeah, I can see the yearbook now. Royce Axelrod, most likely to be sent upstate.
So as would be the case during this issue, we recognize that of course Virgil is going to do something that is going to cause him to interact with this woman and leave a first impression that maybe isn't the best.
That's right. So yes, at that point we see Virgil emerging. He has a conversation with his dad about how he needs to clean up his room before they go out to dinner. And as he's sort of suiting down, I guess, going back to his civilian days, he is spotted by a couple of police officers who happen to be on the lookout for this stolen briefcase, and they see a kid with a backpack, and so they stop him and demand he open his backpack. He asks why, and they say, just show us in there. And of course, him having his static costume inside, he panics and creates a little bit of a distraction and just takes off running.
We've been up and down these alleys, Jessup. Nothing. Jessup.
He's got a backpack.
Excuse me, son. What are you doing here?
Nothing. Just taking a shortcut home.
Mind if we take a look inside your backpack?
Why, what? I didn't do anything.
No one said you did. It's just a precaution.
A precaution, huh? Well?
Huh?
What the?
Hey! Stop! Hey, kid, get back here!
What did you just do, Virgil? You know what you did.
thinks he's gotten away, but he knows that that could be creating some trouble for him. And lo and behold, as we find out later the night at the Hawkins household, as Virgil uses his powers to kind of shove all of the clutter in his room into his closet, which is Chekhov's messy closet. This episode, yeah, he goes on to finally meet Pop's new girlfriend, as is the episode title. And he has a brief conversation with Sharon, where Sharon also not super happy about this idea of their dad dating again, saying that their dad is just acting so out of sorts. He's even singing Motown, which I thought was one of the funnier lines in this whole episode. But yes, so sort of discussing this new woman in their dad's life, and wouldn't you know it, she comes to the door. And Virgil goes to greet her, and then, of course, that they've met before.
Oh boy, must be Trina. She's off work early.
What does she do anyway?
She's a cop.
Hi, honey.
Hello, Robert.
Let me introduce you to my kids. Sharon, this is Trina. And this is my son, Virgil.
I believe we've already met.
Yep, it is, of course, the female police officer that he had met before. And I guess we'll talk about this later in plot, but the whole idea of them alluding to racial profiling, I thought was interesting. I felt it was unfortunate that they didn't really get to explore that very much. It sort of dropped initially. But that's what's heavily implied based on that they talk about him quote unquote fitting the description. He's a young man in the area with a backpack, so they felt like they should stop him. And Static, of course, running leads to them assuming that there's guilt or he had something to do with it, and that's kind of the tension for the rest of the episode is as once we get our commercial cliffhanger where Trina is revealed to be the same officer that interacted with Static prior to his ability to escape. We get Virgil's dad being very, very stern with him, saying that he taught him better and he knows not to run away from the police, and why would he ever do such a thing? And Virgil tries to explain it in a way that I think also sounds very realistic, and what you hear a lot of times, I think, especially from minorities, from young black men that say like, hey, I was scared of why why they were stopping me.
Running away from the police? Now I know I've raised you better than that, Virgil. What you did was not only stupid and dangerous, but completely inexcusable.
But Dad...
Get in your room right now!
So your father tells me you love college.
It's okay.
Such an exciting time.
I guess.
Look at me! Just tell me why you did it.
I don't know. I just got scared, that's all.
That's not acceptable. Your backpack, I want to see it, now! You want to make it even harder on yourself? Fine.
Pops, don't...
I'm gonna go cool off. You're beyond grounded. School, home, that's it. And clean up this room!
But Virgil's dad really wants nothing of it, and to hear nothing of it, and wants to see what was in his backpack, because he obviously had some intel that was what Trina and the other officer were interested in finding out, what Virgil had in there and what Virgil was trying to quote unquote hide from them. So as he demands to see the backpack, of course, Virgil's trying to figure out what he's going to do because his Static costume is still in the backpack. And as you said, Chekhov's closet, Robert goes into the closet to see if he can find the backpack. And of course, all of Static's belongings fall out on top of him. And Robert, in order to, I think, prevent himself from doing something that he would later regret, decides he's going to cool off and informs Virgil that he is big time grounded at that point. Going forward, he's going to go to school and come right home and do his homework, and that's it. He's not going to leave his room for quite some time. So Static, of course, is quite distraught. Meanwhile, we do get a shot of both Trina and Sharon having a conversation where Sharon is also really giving her the cold shoulder and not really engaging in a conversation with Trina, kind of letting her know that she's not really all that welcome there. Later on the next day, we get some at school. We get Richie and Virgil talking about how he's grounded, and Virgil talking about how he doesn't know how he's going to be both Static and Virgil and still serve his punishment that his father has set up at this time, and balancing all of that. And they actually get stopped at that point by Trina, the police officer, and Robert's girlfriend, saying that she needs to ask Virgil some additional information. He says that he's got to get home, but she says and swears that she's cleared this conversation with Robert ahead of time. So they go to the Burgerful and they sit down and have a little chat. And she tells them, like every good police officer, just spills exactly what's going on in a case to a 15-year-old. Like, you're just going to tell every intimate detail about this case to a 15-year-old boy.
I need to talk about why we stopped you. What I'm about to tell you is not for broadcast, okay? You know what the Big Bang is, right?
I heard about it, yeah.
Well, 2 kids about your age stole a metal case which contains the Big Bang formula in a highly concentrated liquid. The case was being delivered to scientists for study. I've got 24 hours to find it.
That's 3 o'clock tomorrow. What happens if you don't find it?
It's combustible. The liquid will turn into gas.
More bang babies?
Double the mutations, at least.
Whoa.
Virgil, if there's anything you know, anything at all.
Wait a sec. You still think I had something to do with this?
You were in that part of town. You fit the description.
I told you I'm innocent. I had nothing to do with it. Why won't you believe me?
But she shares that what exactly was in the case were directly related to the Big Bang, that these are chemicals and these are sort of hyper concentrated versions of the gas, and that if they're not able to contain this gas and retain the gas at some point, that there's going to be a second Big Bang that happens, and because these vials contain a more concentrated version of the gas, that the damage is going to be twice as worse. In the meantime, we do cut back to our very rebellious boys, Royce and Frankie, who are, of course, interested in finding out just what the purple gas is. They've brought it to school to just Einsteins here. And they are in the computer lab on the net, as they say, looking to figure out just what it could be. And they do determine that it is, in fact, related to the Big Bang somehow. I don't know. I don't remember how, if there's an article, something. They determine that it's related to the Big Bang.
I was going to say, yeah, they're just kind of on a computer and we see him like pulling sheets of paper out of the printer.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and by the way, if it wasn't clear, it's been made very, very clear at the beginning that Royce is definitely more of the troublemaker, and Frankie is just sort of like along for the ride. So Royce is the one that's kind of pushing things forward with this, and at this point, Frankie begins to get a little reluctant, I would say, to proceed with whatever plans they have. But the discovery that this is related to the Big Bang really gives Royce an excited look as he opens one of the vials, and some of the liquid gas in there kind of splashes out, and he even inhales some of it. They're interrupted, but as the gas spills out, it spills into a garbage can where we see Chekhov's cockroach and spider drop from the ceiling at that point, just as they leave the computer lab. And that kind of sets us up for our third act here of the rest of the episode. Is we have Virgil not sure. By the way, one of the things, as we mentioned, there's now a time frame for when this thing's going to go off, which is 3 o'clock the next day if they don't find it. So there's a clock ticking down. Virgil is grounded at home, can't be static, and now there's gas that's exposed, and we have one of our young men here inhaling some of that gas as well.
That's right. So we've set up an interesting third act here, which sort of kicks off with Virgil back at home after his conversation with Trina didn't exactly go well. With her still sort of accusing him and not wanting to believe that he was innocent and everything. And so he's sitting there, and he happens to through the air vent in his room, he can hear Trina and his dad talking, and Trina's sort of lamenting that not only have things with Virgil not gone well due to their run-ins, but also she feels like she isn't getting anywhere with Sharon either. And so she tells Robert that she wants to kind of end things, or at least cool them off and give everyone space. So it's kind of a sad moment for Virgil's dad, as he's lost his new girl there, and sort of as Virgil is kind of starting to feel maybe a little bit sorry for his father. He gets a call from Richie that there's a static-sized emergency.
Yeah?
V, you got a little pest control problem at school. You gotta get down here.
Dude, I'm grounded, remember?
Oh, yeah? Well, listen to this. Where's the can of bug spray when you need it?
Static's bug zapping service reporting for duty.
So he breaks solitary and goes and because not only it's not any metahumans we've seen before, but as you mentioned, Chekhov's cockroach and spider, they just get, this is what I love about the Big Bang juice gas or whatever, is that it's just magic. It just there's no rules to this.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody else gets superpowers, but if it falls on an insect or an arachnid, I know they're different, they just get bigger. That's all that happens to them. So there's a giant cockroach and a giant spider now loose in the school. So Static races in just in time to save Richie from getting chowed down on by the cockroach, and then has sort of a longer fight, gets caught in the big web. I was waiting for the Spidey reference. It never comes.
Yeah,
but
I was disappointed. Major league disappointed. You have Static fly into this giant spider web. So much of Static's DNA is homaged or linked to a lot of the typical Spider-Man situations that you could find in the pages of Spider-Man comics for the last 50, 60 years.
Absolutely.
So the fact that they didn't take advantage of saying like a friendly neighborhood Static line, or like, I don't know, a Stan Lee lookalike being on the ground below, or something, anything. I thought they swung and a missed on that one.
He is after that the brief encounter with the spider, he's able to sort of corral the giant bugs.
Can I ask you something? Interrupt.
Sure. Yeah.
What happens to the giant bugs? Because I kept waiting. I was like, all right, Static
They're
doesn't
shrink
have
back
a
down.
lot of
back down, right?
It doesn't have a lot of violence, right? We typically don't see a lot of gruesome violence. People get electrocuted. He shoots his powers at them. Not a lot of fists flying, right? So I'm like, oh, these are insects. They're gonna show him cutting, like, he shocks the cockroach to start, but like the cockroach gets back up. I'm like, oh, well, maybe he'll just shock this thing and we'll see it flip on its back. Like, okay, maybe we're going to intimate death. Nope, it's like on its side, and he leaves it in the middle of the school. And then he goes outside and he has this tussle with the spider, and he pins it to the ground with some weird looking goalposts or something off of the football field. But it's clearly not dead because its legs are still moving. So he doesn't have like a Fortress of Solitude to put these in. What does he do with these things?
He just, I was saying, maybe Superman's and took him to the zoo. Maybe that's the resolution here. Because these. Like, I think they say at some point that Dakota has like a Bang Baby task force, like SWAT team. I feel like we saw that in an episode. But I don't know what they're doing about the giant spider. Where you can put it in hell, you gonna put it in handcuffs? Like, what are we doing with these things?
I'm just picturing the police chief like they're like trying to snap multiple sets of giant like
they're cuffing. We've got 3 sets of handcuffs, and they roll the spider into the back of the paddy wagon.
Oh my gosh!
Oh, amazing!
That's a quip for the week.
I was going to say, there's the reel. But yes, so from there we go back to the Hawkins household where there's a lot of clanking of forks and little to be had. And Sharon speaks up and sort of half apologizes for the way they treated Trina, but is lamenting now that he seems so disappointed and lets his kids have it.
I can't stand this, Daddy. I'm sorry you two broke up, but it was just so weird seeing you with her.
You've made that abundantly clear. Both of you.
Pops, all we...
For a long time now, you two have been telling me it's time I got back out there. That Mom would want it that way. But when I finally find someone I like, this is how you treat her. Look, no one will replace your mother. But I have a life, and I'm gonna live it. You can accept that or not.
So we give Sharon and Virgil a little bit more food for thought as we set up this final day at the school, and we see that Frankie is trying his best to inform Royce that this bang baby gas is dangerous and could have really bad side effects. Royce completely blows him off and notes that he's super strong or getting stronger than any normal man. And it's already better just from having inhaled a little bit of the gas. And as we go on with the day, suddenly, and later on, we see Royce and in class, they're taking some sort of history exam as Virgil continues to be concerned about this sort of time bomb of this gas exploding. And before we know it, Royce gets the full side effects of that gas he inhales, as he sort of mutates into this really wacky, horrific purple. It's like the third Purple Hulk guy, I feel like, since we've covered Static. This is like, we see a lot of this guy.
Mm-hmm.
But different. He's much more, we'll talk about it in visuals. He's a lot more grotesque than, he's not really a traditional Hulk ripoff. But as he starts to kind of go crazy and run room, Virgil pulls the fire alarm, tries to evacuate the school, realizes that the gas must be here on campus, and he makes a call to Trina in the faculty office to know that the gas is here, and he suits up as Static. He finds the locker, which is just purple smoke emanating from it. He wraps it up with a couple of other, pushes it together, and I didn't know Static could do this. He flies it into space. Or at least he flies into like the upper atmosphere and then hurls it into space.
Yep.
So
we learn new powers every week.
Yes. Again, it's a little bit magic sometimes on this. What Static can. But yes, that leaves him a little bit drained. But now, of course, he still has to deal with the transformed Royce. He goes in and sort of tries to calm him down. He's in like a theater room, but and it just goes crazy and attacks him, and Trina and her partner show up to try to stop them themselves, and the Static's able to spring into action, and once again he ties him up with the curtain, takes him outside, and magics a statue so to move the arms around Royce and kind of keeps him locked up. And Static sort of salutes the cops and disappears. So again, I don't know how they're getting him down. I don't know how they're putting handcuffs on this guy.
Yep.
But that's not Static's problem, is it? So
nope.
Job well done. He's off. And I guess all's well that ends well as we cut to the final scene on the steps of City Hall. The police chief is giving a commendation to the 2 officers, as well as Virgil, for their acts of heroism. And we see that Trina and Robert have decided to continue going out, and that Sharon and Virgil have began to warm up to her a little bit as we fade to black this week.
Man, what an interesting episode. Yeah. I think this falls victim to, as I sort of alluded to, wanting to say something, but really falling short. I don't know if that was because of standards and practices, if that was the writer just only thinking that, who knows? Who knows if the writer wanted to say something, but wasn't allowed to, or if they felt like alluding to the idea of racial profiling being something that especially young black men have to deal with on a regular basis was enough just to sort of pseudo touch on that and kind of leave that, because we've seen, I mean, there's a whole episode where we deal with a racist dad, right? Like,
right.
there's whole episodes where we touch on some of these real life, things that would be, I don't want to say educational, but maybe would enlighten or shed light on some real life issues that a lot of people are either ignorant to or maybe don't believe in or what have you. So I was disappointed that was touched on at the beginning and then really kind of just glazed over. It wasn't really addressed. Even if they had just, I think even if in the conversation between Robert and Virgil, where Robert's kind of losing it on Virgil and explaining to him why, because I think us obviously not being Black, we have never been in the middle of that type of conversation, but I've seen representations of those types of conversations or heard Black people talk about those types of conversations that you have to have. So I know enough about that to say that I feel like it would have been more true for Robert to say, hey, this is why we don't run from the police. This is why I've told you not to do that, and I get it. It was a way to, they're trying to make it like it's still a kid's cartoon. Like maybe you don't want to go that deep, but and this was 20 years ago, 22 years ago, right now, or 21 years ago we talked about. So maybe this was as far as they felt like they could take it in writing, but it does feel like that's glazed over very quickly. And then at the end, Static's getting an award from the police with the police officers. It's just, it just doesn't fit with the tone for what that I felt like they were trying to say. And maybe they weren't trying to say anything at the beginning, but I think maybe knowing some of the people that work on this show and knowing what their heart is and hearing their own personal testimonies and talking about things that they as Black people in America have experienced, you would think that it probably wasn't an accident that this was something that was touched on.
Yeah, absolutely. I certainly felt like that in the moment, and especially when it's brought back up when Trina picks Virgil up and they go to the burger shop or whatever, and she's still kind of grilling him about this, and he's standing up for himself and saying, why do you, I didn't have anything to do with this. And she's like, well, why did you run? Right? Because that's that, again, speaking to that, the type of experiences that people have in real life all the time with police, is that the very black and white looking at it, literally and figuratively perhaps, of well, if you haven't done anything wrong, nothing to fear. I think we all know that that's not necessarily always the case in real life. So yeah, it would have been cool to see that delved into a little bit deeper. Again, I'm not expecting a kid's cartoon from 2001 to be like, to tell you it's okay to run from cops. Like I didn't expect it to go that far, but I was interesting to have it be, and also maybe to have, and you kind of delve into like Virgil being hurt that even though he did this thing that his father thinks is wrong, he feels like I feel like it could have been interesting if he's but I'm still your son, I'm a good kid, I wouldn't do this if I didn't have a reason. And he tells him like I was scared, which again in real life I think is a very valid reason for why something like this would happen. So yeah, it would have been something interesting if there's a second conversation with Robert and Virgil where they delve in even if they have to kind of skirt around it in more general terms, it would have been nice to see that focused in on a little bit more. And yes, from that very serious and heady topic to churches and big purple men. I've said on a 5 for my plot this week. Like I said, I think there's some interesting stuff in it. I like seeing like Robert have something to do to be like the stern dad who maybe gives a lesson or has a one-liner at the end of the episode. And again, I think we've talked about this, I think, a lot with some of these stats this month. There's pieces here where any individual piece could maybe be interesting on its own, but maybe it doesn't come together, or at least not as well as it could have.
Yeah, I went with the same score, 5 out of 10. And just the last thing I'll say about the idea of that sort of very serious real life topic being brought on is maybe it's to a detriment that we've had that other episode and where they talk about racism being a thing and Static dealing with that, where we look at that and like, okay, well, this was an entire episode where they dedicated to talking about this real life experience that minorities face. So if I think the bar was set, although that was done with, we had our own critiques about that episode as a whole, and it was done in a way, I think, that at times that maybe was not as effective as maybe as it could have been for whatever reason. But I think that with the bar being set at that height, it's like, oh, well, if we're gonna use this as a platform to talk about these real life experiences and shed the light on some of these things that aren't necessarily everyone's experiences, then maybe we should do that. Maybe that's going to happen in a way that it focuses hyper focused in an episode.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. So yeah, for the rest of the episode to kind of be just like, oh, well, it's, it turns out that it's just the police were kind of in the right about it. We don't really talk about them being held accountable for that, I guess is the thing that kind of stinks. But
right, it's not really a moment where Trina apologized, right, for assuming Virgil's guilt.
Maybe that's truer to real life though than we expect. But I gave it the exact same score, 5 out of 10. I think the rest of the episode is somewhat formulaic and a little bit goofy. Certainly the giant cockroach and giant spider not necessarily being not knowing, not having that tied up, it's just forgotten about, and then him defeating the another Bang Baby monster through happenstance and then getting this big reward at the end it's just a little bit goofy. It just
maybe the spider became like the school's mascot after this.
Maybe he got transported to Africa to be with Anansi.
Ooh,
so he could train him to be like,
oh my god,
his
Anansi and Anansi the spider and his sidekick a spider.
Now we're talking. All right. Let's move on to our next category, Liam, which of course is going to be animation and visuals. I believe you said Toma Productions, which, forgive me.
Tama Production Company. I checked. They have done 4 total episodes of Static Shock, and I believe this is somehow the first one of theirs we've ever covered. So,
okay.
Because we've talked before about some of the off episodes of Static Shock from season 1 and the usual culprit there. But yeah, this Tama Production Co. I think is a new studio to us. So, everybody's a little bit off. I think this is another one. It's not quite the big Disney heads and
definitely not as expressive. For sure.
Yeah. But I feel like everybody, especially I feel like weird characters, like Virgil's dad is really inconsistent. And I feel like people's heights and weights, I guess the positioning, depending on where they're supposed to be in the room or if they're walking away, kind of, it just doesn't feel like that's on the money here.
Mm-hmm.
And like the action itself, I didn't really see any problems with. Like I said, it's a very wacky episode, and there isn't a lot of action. other than the the bug fight at the end of Act Two, and then the brief scuffle with Royce in his monster form at the end. But yeah, I think the main thing I know is because this is such a dialogue heavy episode, is that I feel like everybody's, it's not just, oh, they look different, it's that it keeps changing, which we've talked about before is kind of the bigger issue, as opposed to just a different look depending on a director or an animation company.
Yeah, consistently inconsistent is kind of what I had there. I think even Trina's look, I mean, there's obviously a couple of different looks that they have for her, both in her police uniform, out of her police uniform. But there's just something off about the way that everybody looks from scene to scene.
Like the background extras, they look like characters from a different show to me. They're running out when Virgil pulls the fire alarm. These look like they came out of like Scooby, like Hanna-Barbera 60s Scooby-Doo. Like, I don't know, it's like the hairstyles or something. And I assume it's just stock models. So I don't know, maybe I just haven't paid enough attention to like the background stock people at Virgil's high school before. Maybe. But I was just like, these people don't look like they belong. These people don't look like they fit in this show. Even in this season 2, not quite DCAU yet look to the show.
Right. Yeah, I didn't have a ton written down because a lot of it's so dialogue heavy, and we don't get a ton of interesting visuals. The spider, again, missed opportunity aside for Spider-Man references. The static flying directly out of the classroom into a giant spider web, I thought was a neat trick. As he's sort of looking for the spider, not expecting it to be outside. But yeah, him versus the roach was okay, but again, it's sort of, I'm like, well, how this thing is just knocked unconscious. Like, what are we doing here? It's gonna wake back up and continue to terrorize because you clearly kill it. Him using the ingenuity to use parts of, I couldn't tell if it was like the offensive lineman thing that he was using to like pin the spider to the field, or if those were supposed to be goalposts. Because if those were goalposts, they were the worst goalposts I've ever seen drawn. Clearly done by, an animation studio likely not familiar with the concept of American football. You could probably excuse them, but if it was, then you would hope that would have been caught by the people that were responsible for storyboarding it. But again, maybe it wasn't supposed to be goalposts, but certainly seemed like that they were. And then I think they were at least successful in making Royce look grotesque. He's the first Bang Baby that's like, I feel like is not super happy with their powers. Like he's made a huge mistake. Like he's messed up big time by deciding to inhale this Bang Baby gas juice. Like, just, yeah, immediately regretted it. I will also say that the ending, I don't know the physics of how you would make a statue's arms move as if they were actual human arms. Like how you would articulate a statue's arms without it just like ripping the metal or whatever it was made of. That was just beyond me, and that took me out of that moment as he like makes the statue's arms just kind of like rotate as if it was actual human arms or something. Not a fan of that. Very distracting. So for all those reasons, I ended up giving animation visuals a 5 out of 10 for this week.
Yeah, I went 1 point lower. I went with a 4 out of 10, like I said, and which is more to what we've already spoken about. Just like I said, I can settle into an alternate art style, or with the best of them here. We certainly do that all the time in the other shows we cover. But yeah, just not very interesting. And then the like I said, the Royce design, it's interesting because, like we said, he isn't just like a Hulk guy. He's got like these weird proportions, and like what looks like his spine is like shooting up out of his back, but it doesn't really feel like it fits even these early seasons of Static. And we've had some pretty wacky Bang Babies over these 2 seasons, but I don't know. It just didn't quite work for me. It just didn't come together for me. So yeah, all things not the worst that we've ever seen, but yeah, not great either.
Not a great effort, that is for sure. All right, Liam, let's move on to our next category, which of course is going to be music. Richard Wolf, not that one, responsible for the music this week. And I noticed that we kicked things off with a reuse of the song Let's Get It Started, Let's Get It Rolling, which we talked about earlier in the month. If you recall, that song was playing during the which one was that? Was that the Sunspots episode, I think?
Yes, that's
yeah.
Hot Streak returns to the high school. That song's playing.
So I was unaware that they reused the music for situations that didn't necessarily match up with the same characters. So even more reason to just kind of question it. Can you imagine like just the same song that is playing like during a Riddler episode, then coming back in like 3 episodes later during like a Two-Face episode? Like, feels very out of place. Like, what is this song? Why is this playing? Whose theme is this?
This is a generic crime is happening track, I guess. It wasn't like the Hot Streak specific one about like back up, I'm burning up or whatever. That one I think is just Hot Streaks, but yeah, there's a Let's Get It Started, Let's Get It Rolling, I guess, has some reuse. That's just a general like dangers afoot music.
But
that's that's really the only song other than Static theme. I think that's the only lyrical song we had in the episode.
Correct. I was surprised. I was honestly shocked. I was like, within the first 3 seconds, we have a song featuring some reused lyrics here. So I guess this is going to be a pretty lyric heavy episode, and it was not. So maybe this is another one of those episodes that could have used it in order to come across as a little bit more to distract from some of the visuals or the lack of effective plot. So I didn't really notice much other than, of course, the static theme that kicks in when we get our static transformation sequence later on in the episode. And then, of course, as he's battling both the spider and the roach, and then the ultimate final battle with one Royce Axelrod. But so I ended up giving music a 5 out of 10. It's fine. There's some background stuff that plays in some of the scenes that are a little bit more heart-wrenching when Robert's talking to Virgil and Sharon, but there's not a ton. I think I could have used, like, when she mentions Motown, I thought that we were going to get like a rip-off Motown song at some point, and like a 60s 70s like
there's a fun little sting when Trina walks into the room. Oh, we've met before. It's like a like at the end there, which I quite appreciated.
That's good.
My only other note for I think is when after Robert sort of storms out of Virgil's room after their big fall, Virgil sort of like solemnly opens his backpack, and he's staring at the static suit, and they play the static theme, but it's not just the stock. Like they bring in those like pipe organs, but played solemnly. Which I don't think we've heard. I mean, obviously we talk about that all the time, Superman and Batman and characters like that, but I don't remember too many we've covered to date where they play that way with the static theme. So you're playing the heroic music, but in a more like tragic way, because at this point it's, static is the whole problem. That's the whole thing gotten Virgil into trouble. So I appreciated that note. And so I ended up giving a 6 out of 10. Definitely would have been higher if we had lyrics to talk about, but
if I didn't mention it, a 5 out of 10 for me. But we can always hope for our next round of static reviews that we'll have more lyrical content to appreciate. All right, Liam, let's move on to our final category of the day, which, of course, is going to be our voice actors. We, of course, have our series regulars taking place here, but we also have a couple of guest stars that are worth noting, including Pop's girlfriend herself. So let's get into this week's voice cast.
Absolutely. So, of course, we do briefly have some of our regulars that at the time. We have Michelle Morgan as who gets a little bit more to do, but not a ton, but she does get to a bit more range with Virgil, and then when they have the big argument with Robert at the start of the third act, we have Jason Marsden as Richie, of course. Briefly have the great Dennis Haysbert as the chief of police, just there to give end, doesn't get to do anything else in the episode. But my first fun star is playing Trina's the other cop in the episode is Nestor Carbonell, who probably would be best be known. He's one of those, oh, it's that guy, but would probably best be known. He's the mayor in The Dark Knight, who ends up like drinking acid. Or no, the commissioner drinks acid. I forget what happens to the mayor. But
isn't he the guy? Didn't he also? He was the Deflator Mouse stand-in Batman during in the live action Tick series. Well,
I believe you're right. Yes, definitely. I feel like he's been on 1,000 of those like USA shows too. Like I feel like he was on Psych and Burn Notice and all. It was definitely definitely a guy. When you see him, you go, "Oh yeah, that guy."
My favorite line that he has is when the after Royce has turned into the monster and the cops arrive at the school and Trina is there and she's trying to take on and she gets handed, her tail handed to her, and so he comes up and Static actually gets knocked down also. So Garcia goes over to like check on him and he's like, "Stay here. I gotta help my partner." And they don't show him. He just runs off screen, and then like a split second later, gets thrown back right next to Static. Yeah, I mean, it's more of a visual gag than it is like the voice acting. But I cackled.
That was a good bit. Yes, agreed. But yeah, elsewhere in the cast, we just talked about him last week, but as our titular villain of the episode, or not titular villain, the villain of the episode, Royce doesn't get a cool villain name. We have once again Bumper Robinson. We just talked about him last week as Slipstream, a regular here, and he doesn't sound like Fat Albert this week. So we know Mr. Robinson has a little bit of range to his voice acting talents.
Yeah, I thought he did a fine job. I did not think that there was anything super unique. I mean, most of it is his interaction with his buddy, and then we get his interaction with we get a couple of interactions with Virgil as he sort of bumps into him in the high school in the hallway. But yeah, there's some good, like, yeah, he's a devious up to no good kid. Like clearly he kind of fills that role pretty well.
Absolutely, and his little sidekick is by Ry Hunt, and that actor would best be known for playing a character in an Australian series, Heartbreak High, which I've heard is a very big deal over there. I think that's like their Degrassi or 90210 or one of those types of shows. Yes.
Okay. Right.
I believe it's an Australia only show, but it's a big deal. I think if you're in back in the woods,
down under, we got to talk to Nathan from Superman the Animated Podcast.
Yeah, from whether or not Heartbreak High, if I'm over Heartbreak High or not, as a worthy note to bring up IMDb. But yes, where in our cast before we get to the main event, we will mention, of course, Cheryl Lee Ralph playing Trina, who folks would know in as far as DCAU roles. She also the Cheetah in Justice League, but also currently has I think a pretty big starring role on the very popular Abbott Elementary show on US TV right now. So I think she does a fine job, like stern, take no crap, serious woman. They don't ask a lot of her beyond that. But maybe she gets her muscles a little bit more in that scene in the kitchen with Robert. Virgil's listening in, and she's kind of lamenting how she's kind of made a mess of things and how Virgil doesn't want to do with her, and that's going poorly with Sharon as well. I think she does a pretty good job overall.
Yeah, I think she's fine. I think her. I mean, does she come back on this series? I don't remember seeing her again.
There's one more Trina episode.
Okay, all right. Yeah. So I mean, I don't think that they asked her to show very much emotion other than that scene where she's kind of ending things with Robert. So maybe not fair to judge her. I think her role in Justice League is a lot bigger, a lot more memorable, a lot more emotion to be shown. So yeah, I think I think from likely what they asked of her, she's like the prototypical police officer. Like it's like a military person, there's sort of like an expectation for how they carry themselves, how they talk, and kind of being emotionless. Maybe it may be cliched, but it's kind of, or stereotyping, but it's kind of like the stereotyping of a stereotypical police officer is like, there's not a whole lot of emotion that they're going to show. They're not going to show a lot of like heart to you in their heart to heart talk, about trying to get to the bottom of their case. It's kind of like they're not able to. So yeah, I think that for that casting, for that character, I think her performance is pretty effective.
Agreed. And then last but not least, in addition, of course, we have our main actor to talk about, but Kevin Michael Richardson as Robert Hawkins. Again, like we kind of talked about in plot, I like that we get to see him act a little bit more. He's not not just the stern dad kind of raising the eyebrow or cracking a joke here. He's he gets to show a little bit of emotion, from being the angry dad yelling at Virgil to having sort of the sadder moment with when Trina comes off, and then at dinner when he's when he's sort of just reading them and talking about how he needs to move on with his life and everything, and then the little epilogue where he's back in good spirits in there going to get food or whatever. He gets a lot to do this week, and unsurprisingly for a guy of his talents, he does great.
Now, I thought that the standout is the scene where he's really giving Virgil the business in that first scene. He gets to raise his voice, and like I believed he was an angry dad. Like it was 100% believable. Plot aside for maybe some of the holes or some of the things that we would have liked to have seen kind of further explored, I think there's the real raw emotion came out in his voice acting there, and it was really good. And then even a little bit later, as you mentioned, like the conversation that he has with Sharon and Virgil about like, hey, you're the people that told me like that you wanted me to move on, that mom would have wanted it this way, like, and you guys are being jerks. Like the fact that he's able to as an adult be vulnerable and share this with his kids, like that came across as being really, really authentic. So yeah, unsurprisingly, as you mentioned, an actor of his stature being able to pull off quite the range of emotion, and certainly dig down a little bit deeper and pull out something that was maybe not asked of him very often, I thought was unsurprising, but certainly welcomed.
Absolutely. And then him playing off of our main star and Phil Lamar, always good. And he actually once again gets a lot to do there, from his first interaction with Trina when she's stopping him to search the backpack, to him unable to sort of own up to the real reason of why he ran, and having to sort of try to get his dad to to believe him despite not really being forthright with him, and then dealing with Trina again later on in the diner and all that. Again, he gets a good amount to do as well in this episode, and again, even less surprisingly, perhaps Phil Lamar, good at voice acting, good at acting.
Yeah.
So he gets a lot to do. He gets a lot more to sink his teeth into this week.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add to that. We talk about it each and every time we get to do a static episode or static review, and certainly his role in Justice League, and he's a dynamic voice actor that's able to pull off so many different emotions regardless of which voice he's doing. And I think it's his the fear, like the conversation. I go back to that conversation that he has with Robert, where he's trying to emote like, hey, like I was scared. I was scared in this moment. Like came across as being very authentic. And then later on, like when he's he calls up Trina to let her know that the Bang Baby gas is there. Like, you could tell there was like still hesitation in trusting this person that he has reason not to trust. So there's still like a little hesitation in the vocal performance and the way that he's like communicating with her. So yeah, little nuances, little things that he does to sort of evoke those emotions that he's trying to get across are why he will continue to get voice acting roles for as long as he possibly wants to, I imagine.
Absolutely, yeah. So for the strength of our last two gentlemen, we've talked about Mr. Richardson and Mr. Lamar alone. I came across strong 8 out of 10 for my voice acting score this week.
Yep, I went with the same exact score actually. So an 8 out of 10 for my voice acting as well. I think based solely, if we had to look at it was heavily weighted on those two last performances. I'd say not that anybody else was detrimental or did not do what they were asked, but I think just going above and beyond, and that's why. What we look for, I think, when we're a lot of times grading the voice acting is just, what pulled you into the episode, what came across as, man, that was really effective, or that felt real, or that felt like they were really that character emoting that, whatever emotion they're trying to get across. So yeah, I'd say there was a couple of examples from Mr. Michael Richardson or Kevin Michael Richardson and also Phil Lamar in this episode. So great, not surprising that we both had high scores on that one. All right, Liam, let's total up our scores here. And coming up here at the end, I end up with a 23 out of 40 for this week. So not great.
And somehow, I think we had the same score in any category, but somehow we still ended up with the exact same final score. And I also have a 23 out of 40 for my final score.
That's right. Now, we already mentioned Trina does come back for another episode. So it feels like even though our villain doesn't return, this maybe doesn't have the same impact as Richie's dad is a racist. Sons of the Father. The episode, it feels like maybe this at least gets a 1 thumb up because we need to know who this Trina person is. Like, I guess I'll reserve judgment until we get to see that second Trina episode. But you would think introducing a character that comes back later to play a role, I would say it's probably important, especially based on the development of the relationship between Static and his dad and Robert and his kids and all that stuff. Probably a 1 thumb up, maybe like a half thumb up.
We'll give this the old Orange Cassidy thumbs up for this one. I think give it just a little thumbs up, but yes, I think there's something here.
Okay, all right, Liam. We will begin to wrap things up. Thank you everybody for tuning in this week. Don't forget, if you'd like to support the podcast, there are, of course, a myriad of ways to do so. Listening to the podcast, you are doing so, supporting the podcast just in that way. So we thank you if you're listening this week. Thank you to everyone who listens each and every week. If you would like to support us and go above and beyond the normal way of just listening, there are a couple different ways that we'll suggest for you. If you're listening on a podcast app, pull up the app, see if it'll let you leave a review for us, whether it's a 5-star review or a little blurb about the podcast like Apple Podcast does. You can go ahead and do so. That helps us out. That helps spread the word about the podcast and gets people listening. Tell people about the podcast also. If you have friends that enjoy these cartoons also, feel free to share the pod with them and make a recommendation. If you're listening to us on Spotify, make sure you interact with our weekly poll and question of the week. We always have a lot of fun with those. I imagine there might be some sort of giant spider / giant roach themed question this week on the poll. So if you want to get your voice heard about perhaps what happened to those two creatures You can interact with us with our question of the week on the Spotify app. As we mentioned at the top, head over to youtube.com/thepodtower and subscribe to that channel there. Like our videos as they are posted. Last week, we posted our entire new episode, our bonus episode of reviewing the latest issue of Batman: The Adventures Continue, where we talked with best friend of the show, Monica Kubina. We did an interview with her talking about her work on the series, working with different artists, the work that she did on the exclusive merchandise that celebrated the 30th anniversary of Batman, the animated series. It's a great interview. We had a great time in talking with her. So head over to youtube.com/thepodtower and check out that video along with the rest of the videos there from our friends over at Watchtower Database and, of course, Tim Talk. Liam, you can also support the podcast monetarily if you'd like to. You can check out the show notes. There's a link there to donate to us directly if you want to buy us a coffee. We have a couple people every single month that do that, and we are so grateful if you put your hard-earned dollars in our pockets to help us buy a Dunkin' Donuts coffee or a Starbucks here or there. It's much appreciated. There's also a link to our merchandise store. You can check that out if you would like to and pick yourself up a piece of merchandise. There's usually a sale that happens, I would say, once every couple of weeks. So wait for a sale. There'll be a banner at the top of the store and get some merchandise there. They just ran a free shipping last weekend, and there's usually some sort of percentage off that follows that within a couple of weeks. So be on the lookout for that. Speaking of being on the lookout, Liam, as we talked about, next week we will be in our 5th Saturday of the month, which means we are going to take a trip around the multiverse, as we are wont to do. We are headed for an Elseworlds review, and something tells me it's going to be in honor of a rather large celebration that we just passed here. If you're listening on our original air date,
that's right. So just this month we did the 85th anniversary of the first issue of Action Comics #1, which of course featured the first appearance of none other than the Man of Steel himself, Superman, and Lois Lane, and a few other classic Superman parts of the Superman mythos. So we thought for our Elseworlds treat, we would look to a much popular place and one that we've kind of kicked the tires on before, but have not covered before, that being the animated movie from probably about 10 years ago now, Superman versus the Elite.
Very good. Very exciting. I'm kind of going into this blind. I don't remember a whole bunch about it. I probably knew something about it when it originally debuted, but 10 years ago might as well be 100 years ago to me. So excited to check this one out and celebrate 85 years of the Man of Steel and all of those supporting characters as we check that out next week. It's going to be a blast. But until then, I'm Cal.
And I'm Liam.
And we will talk to you on the next episode of the DCAU Review.
Bye-bye.